what's going on, LAFB Nation, Bruin family? It is the Thriller and Madman back together again for all of your UCLA football needs. So excited to be talking with all of you this evening. And my goodness, what a last few days it's been. Mr. DeShaun Foster is absolutely on fire. And so we've got two new recruits that we're very excited to be talking about. But first and foremost, my brother from another mother, Will the Thrill Decker. Thriller, how we doing? How's life? My goodness, it's been a wild NBA playoffs. How is everything going with you the last few days?
I mean, can life get any better? Summertime in LA. I'm in Venice. I got the beach right behind me. Thrilling NBA playoff game. I mean, shades of Reggie Miller in the Garden. Tyrese Halliburton throwing up the choking sign. Aaron Nemhard looking like my guy Klay Thompson out there. Holy smokes. What a game. It was a lot of fun, man. And, you know, I think the best part about this is UCLA is surging right now. And you know, I've really thought a lot about this podcast. I'm really excited to do this podcast. And, you know, let's lead in with this question I got for you, man. Is UCLA finally cool again amongst young kids? Because to me, that is what it's looking like with some of these commitments coming in. And we could talk all about it. But that's the lingering question I got after these commitments and, you know, just where the program's at. Is UCLA football as a program in the cool kids crowd once again? And I think the answer right now is yes.
Thriller, I think it's yes. And it's such a masterful question that you ask, because I think the perception of UCLA football the last 8 to 10 years has been, you know, on the second half of Mora. I think there was a lot of perception around Mora, you know, being a little distracted. There was some stuff going on with his personal life. You know, the momentum that he had those first 3 years, he couldn't replicate it. And you sort of felt the stress. Mora's stress was kind of indicative of the program culture those last few years. Then obviously you got Chip coming in, who was like a postdoc or like a professor of, a subject in a university kind of coming in. And it was, you know, we loved the books and ball, you and me, but it was a very stiff atmosphere, you know, and there was a certain amount of guys. And obviously the Chip stories about recruiting or lack thereof are well documented. We won't get into it here. We've conversed about that for so many years, but it felt very much of like an ivory tower when it came to recruiting. And now here comes DeShaun Foster, who I know everyone wants to talk about the original video Big Ten Media Day, but the even more significant video to me, Will, was when Martin Jarman enters the Wasserman Center to the team and says, you know, we did one better. You guys wanted someone who sort of believed and wanted to bleed to be a Bruin. I did you one better. I got you a Bruin. And then DeShaun walks in and the place goes bonkers. And I think between DeShaun, his youthful exuberance, I think Martin Jarman's youthful exuberance, I think the hires that DeShaun has made, right down to kind of his style with the leather jackets and the sneaks, and you know, bringing in a Tino Sunseri with his shades and his gelled hair on the sideline, and all these young, hungry coordinators, they're leaning more into social media. They're leaning more into recruiting California. They're more relatable to the younger audience. You know, so much conversation these last few days about how the athletic operation is looking to change with this new executive from Disney as the chief revenue officer, and looking at doing very different things in terms of tickets, in terms of community outreach, in terms of luxury suites. So, Will, I think you're spot on. It does feel like it's cool to be a UCLA football player again, in a way that it felt very cool in the early Mora years, with all of those great uniform changes, a sold-out Rose Bowl crowd, guys like Barr and Kendricks and Jack, and the way it felt cool to be a UCLA football player in the 80s and 90s. And so this is that new era with DeShaun Foster. And the fact that he's an alum, Will, the fact that he bleeds UCLA, we've talked about it so much, and the fact that this is his calling, this is his destination job, I think all of that enthusiasm is dripping from him, and I think it's palpable. And there's an incredible momentum here, to your point.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, man. And like these two commitments, the people that were out here on this recruiting visit, The Friday Night Lights events that I got to attend, I thought that was a very cool, well put together event by DeShaun. You saw when, one of the guys we're going to talk about in a second made his commitment this past weekend, live on a video feed. It was in a really luxurious backyard event. It looked like a nice dinner they were having. DeShaun cashed in a long distance three.
Yes.
Guy Steph Curry. I mean, what's cooler than being cool, as Andre 3000 once said, and it's ice cold. And that's what we're approaching to the recruiting world. And it's just been a lot of fun, man. So I'm excited to dive in on some commitments. We got a transfer receiver coming in from Oregon right now. We got a social media star that's a kicker coming from Arizona. We just got a lot of great things going on. And with UCLA football, I mean, I can't remember a better time in the last 4 to 5 years to cover this team because we have news every freaking week.
No question about it, Will. No question about it. And what better way to start than our two most recent kind of big name recruits? And it's interesting, Will. It felt like it's been a slow burn to some of the conversations we had earlier about 2026 recruiting, where DeShaun has been so focused, and I think rightfully so, on this 2025 season, the makeup of this roster, the construction of his assistant coaches, the type of program that he wants to run. And he's been so focused there that now, the machine is sort of ready for 2025. Now he's getting ready for 26. And just in the last 2 weeks, recruits 5 through 8 are now sort of filling this 26 class. And Will, two guys in particular, I think we're really excited about. The first is defensive end, edge, all edge help on the way. Yaho Gad, and really excited about him from Medina, Tennessee. Obviously, this is for class of 2026. Rivals had him the 18th ranked player in the state of Tennessee, which is a rich state when it comes to football, and 29th overall at his position. He's 3-star. But I know, Will, you even tweeted earlier in the week that listen, let not let the stars fool you here. There's a tremendous amount of upside with this young man, particularly at 6'5", 260 pounds, and his ability to sort of grow into his body, along with potentially even growing another inch and a half. You're talking about kind of a game-changing game wrecker if the ceiling reaches his potential. So, Thriller, first with Yaho, your thoughts. And the first thing I thought of before handing it over to you is when I heard his name, and it's a Middle Eastern name, and similar to sort of my background, so I enjoyed the name, but it also reminded me of The Sandlot. You remember so it's like Gad.
How can I forget, man? One of the all-time classics.
One of the all-time classics. So we're really happy to have Yaho Gad with the Bruins at UCLA, and your initial thoughts, Thriller.
We got Yaho coming in, man. And it's a really good signing for a lot of different fronts, man. You see the high upside this guy possesses, 6'5", 260 pounds. He's going into his senior year. So, still a lot of room to grow. He's very similarly built to Anthony Papa Jones, the guy we just got a week ago, a 4-star talent in his own right. And when you look at Yaya's recruiting profile, it looks like a guy that was about to skyrocket up the recruiting world. And, sure, 3-star status, that's fine. You know what I care more about than 3-star status? The offers he possessed at a whole. If Kirby Smart offers you from Georgia, I want that player at UCLA. Simple as that. That's Georgia, who won 2 national championships in the last 3 to 4 years when it comes to college football. Kirby Smart knows a thing or two about developing players. I mean, look at all the players he puts into the NFL consistently with this team. It's, one of the best programs in the country. So if one of the best programs in Georgia wants a guy like that, I want a guy like that for UCLA. Texas, Steve Sarkisian offered him as well. I think Texas, for the next 3 to 4 years moving forward, given the loss of talent when it comes to the coaching at Ohio State, where Jim Knowles, the legendary defensive coordinator, goes to Penn State, and our guy Chip Kelly, goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll see what happens at Ohio State, but Texas might be that team that really kind of seizes the mantle where college football feels as wide open as it's been in a long time without that true number one dominant figure. Texas and Georgia, those are the 2 schools I think could be taking the mantle back. Both offered Yaho, and then Florida State, a lot of different guys coming in there and just making waves. Yaya's got a great offer list. And the fact that I really like with Yaho is he's so big, so physical. He kind of plays that J.J. Watt style of football. And this is not a direct comparison to J.J. Watt, But when you look at it, he can line up on the edge and he can line up on the interior. He can play all four positions of the defensive line. And if you watch the film, he's sometimes blitzing the quarterback through double teams on the interior. Sometimes he's going out on the edge. So that versatility, like maybe he's not an edge in college. Maybe we could find the best position for him. But versatility allows you to kind of have a couple areas where you can make an impact on the football field. So when you combine all that, where he's drastically underrated, his size is ridiculous, and he has position versatility, home run. I think Yaya is a big, big hit for UCLA. And he was the guy we talked about that announced at the event at the Foster household, it looked like. So Yaya, we are pleased to have you at UCLA. We'd love to get you on the pod. We're in a little bit of communication right now. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But Yaho Gad going to UCLA, I mean, come on, man. That is a huge hit for UCLA Bruins.
Yaho Gad Thriller. God is good for UCLA football, as the saying goes. And just double-clicking on a couple things that you said, Will, that really are meaningful. It's so true, right? I mean, stars change. Different rating agencies have different stars. You know, you could be a 4 in one rating agency, a 3 in another. And so there's a lot of variability there. But the true litmus test is who else wants you? You know, it's almost like a dating principle. You know, it's like who else wants you? And if Georgia and Texas are on that list, you're talking about the two teams that perhaps outside of Alabama have been the most successful in college football the last 4 to 5 years, you know, in terms of total body of work. And if they see you as someone that can come in and make a difference for them, then you obviously have the tools. And I think the reason for that, Will, you said it best, is that versatility piece. And if anything taught us this past year with Femi Oladipo, with some of the other players that we had, with the Kane Madrano, you know, guys that started at one position with the program and then ultimately found stardom elsewhere in the program because of just an incredible athleticism and an incredible physicality. And it was a matter of playing that game of Tetris to find where they would succeed. It really feels like Yaho Gad fits into that mold. And whether he, to your point, whether he kind of completes his career at UCLA as an edge or as an interior or both, you know, I think the sky is the limit. And getting him into this Ikaika Molloy system, I think is going to be very, very exciting. And so, Will, in addition to Mr. Gad, we've got another recruit here, someone more decorated than Yahya. To your point, someone who maybe has caught more of the national eye given where they are. Camden Jensen, Will, tight end, 6'7", 250 pounds, from the great state of Colorado, founder of LAFB, Ryan Dyrud's hometown. Jensen here, Will, very, very interesting. You're talking about the number 2 overall recruit in the state of Colorado. And I know that Colorado isn't quite California or Texas or Florida or Louisiana, but to be the number 2 ranked player in the entire state, I think is very significant. And then when you're talking about the number 17 overall tight end nationally, Will, this is a really significant get. When you talk about that big body, you talk about the lineage of tight ends that UCLA has had the last 6 or 7 years. You talk about someone that can come in, you know, Habermel probably exits, you know, and there's going to be a void next year. A lot of guys kind of vying for it. Jensen is sort of set up with that big body in this particular offense that is so balanced with Tino Sunseri, so predicated on moving the chains, having that big target to be that first down anchor, but then also that big body, Will, to get into the run blocking scheme and be able to open things up for a DeShaun Foster-led running game. To me, those two things are a match made in heaven. Your thoughts on Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, another, you know, home run hit. And when you have guys choosing UCLA over the list of schools that Yaho Gad did, I mentioned Georgia, Texas, Florida State. You look at Camden Jensen's offers like Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida State. It's been a long time since we've had some of these guys that have, you know, weighed the options of the who's who in college football and said, you know what, I'm going to stick in Westwood. This is where I want to go and I want to play football. 6'7", 250 pounds. It's clear DeShaun knows they had to get bigger in the offseason. The Big Ten is known for its brute strength, its size, its, you know, the trench play, as we've talked about in depth. You get a 6'5", 260-pound junior, and you're getting a 6'5" or 6'7", 250-pound tight end. that's some Big Ten football right there. That's some good old-fashioned American beef. And what I like about this, man, is not only you're getting a player that spurns some of the national powers to come to UCLA, but what about the national footprint they've put together with this recruiting weekend? I mean, Camden Jensen's coming from Colorado, as we mentioned. Yaho Gad coming from Tennessee. I mean, that's SEC country. Two other players that were very high on UCLA that did not commit. Rodney Colton Jr. is a 4-star linebacker from Georgia. Like, when's the last time we've had guys from Georgia in that type of country with Bulldog country? You know, Florida's right down the road, Ole Miss right around the corner, saying, hey, I want to check out UCLA. There's something going on there. And then you look at Micah Champion-Smith, the 6'6", 300-plus pound lineman. According to 24/7 Sports, Madman, there's between two teams at the top. It's UCLA and it's Ohio State. Like, the fact that you are competing for one of the top, linemen in the state of Florida, and it's between the reigning national champions and UCLA, it just touches back to the original point that we started with this podcast. UCLA feels like it's cool again, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing they have going forward. DeShaun Foster and his staff have done a phenomenal job doing the little things, trying to get this program back on. And you talked about him. He's an alumnus. This is a guy that cares deeply about UCLA. And I think that extra 10, 15, 20% he's putting in because he loves and he cares about UCLA, and this is his dream job in a lot of regards, it's paying off right now. Yep. And you can see it with the transfer portal gets Nico Iamaleave, the top quarterback in the portal, to the recruiting class. You're getting guys that come in and make plays. And just the last point I'll leave you with, Madman, doesn't it feel a little bit like the early Pete Carroll days at USC, the team across town, where he's taken a lot of different talented guys and he's going, hey, best player's going to play, man. Like, you guys can come here. You look at what he did in the transfer portal. I think they brought in close to double-digit, maybe more, defensive backs for this team. It's insane what he's doing. He goes, hey, come here and compete. If you can, if you can get a starting spot, you're going to play here, and you're going to play here for a long time. So UCLA is doing some phenomenal stuff, and just another tip of the cap to the coaching staff and what they're building, because UCLA is on the radar of a lot of these kids that we just never anticipated it happening over the last 5 years.
No, it's such a great point, Will. And there's two elements there in particular. The first is it feels very much that DeShaun has a plan, and he's very intentional about who he's going after. I think you made a great point here. He's going after size. He's going after athleticism. He's going after upside. And whether that upside he finds locally in the state of California or nationally, I think he's really looking at the development piece of this, of saying there's some raw talent that we're looking for in terms of kind of size and speed and whatnot. And our whole focus of our program is to be able to shape that, through competition and through development. And what it reminds me of, Will, to your point, is 2025 for UCLA, because I don't think we can really count 2024 as DeShaun's first year, as crazy as that sounds, because when you only get the job in February and March, you're scrambling to sort of just put a product on the field. This is his first true off season. And in a lot of ways, it's 2025 for UCLA what 2001 was for USC with Pete Carroll. That first year, to your point, where he brought in very intentionally really physical recruits, a lot of upside, both locally as well as out of state. SC goes 6-6, gets that bowl game, and then that sets up the trajectory for that run in the 2000s. And I think we're sort of seeing something similar here with what DeShaun is building and now getting that quarterback. Everyone kind of forgets in 2001, Carson Palmer was the quarterback, but he had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. He was in 3 different systems, finally then got Norm Chow, got some stability, and then took off. And now we've got a situation with Nico, 2 years at Tennessee, obviously redshirt 1 year, Heupel, wasn't quite the system. Now he's got someone that really, from a Tino Sunseri perspective, I think is going to maximize his abilities. And so is that sky the limit? And so I think it's a great point about sort of the reference to Pete Carroll. The other reference I'll make, Will, is one that's UCLA grown. He's building this program a lot in the image of Donahue. When you think about even just the alum element, But Donahue sort of took this approach, particularly in the early 80s, of I'm really looking for guys with big upside. I want to get the guys that have things that you can't teach. Like you can't teach size and you can't teach speed, but then I want to teach everything else. And he's been very intentional about kind of that philosophy. And it's been really interesting because if you look at a lot of the other Big Ten schools, up until this point, on average, they're sitting at about 13 to 14, 15 commits for 2026. UCLA's still at 8. You got a school like SC who's at like 27. I mean, they've sort of gone bonkers. So it's been a slow burn with DeShaun, but it feels very intentional. It feels very methodical. It feels very strategic. And I think we're expecting that number to go way up in the summer. But I think he knows exactly what he wants, and we feel like we're in great hands. So it's just so exciting at this point, Will, to your point. UCLA feels cool again. It's exciting. And it feels so cool that, we talked about the Georgias and the Texases and the Florida States. Well, we just plucked another guy from the transfer portal from none other than reigning Big Ten regular season champion Oregon. Jalen St. Paul, your classic 5'11", 180-pound burner. You're talking about go routes. You're talking about special teams, kick return game, punt return game. Didn't get a lot of action on the field. Last year got no action with Oregon. From Carlsbad, California, wants to now come back home. And I think, again, Will, to your point, if you're good enough, if you're fast enough to get recruited by Oregon, you got something here. And it feels like St. Paul now wants to come to UCLA and really build something closer to home. Your thoughts on St. Paul? Because I'm really excited. Another added weapon of athleticism here.
Yeah, when you look at it, Jaden Wilson is a top-end speedster we added from Arkansas in the transfer portal. And Quasi, elite route running, very fast in the open field. I think, the tape assumes that if you watch a lot of Quasi Gilmer like we did. With St. Paul, it's a very cool pickup in a lot of regards because I think, one, he's a local kid, and then two, it kind of gives you an extra gear towards the speed that you can provide in the slot and the size, the 5'11", 180 pounds. Injuries happen and you need to have speed at all costs. And it looks like Tino Sinceri is kind of doing that speed and space type of system where, if you remember Curtis Rourke last year, there's a lot of crossing routes. There was a lot of different kind of things where it's like, I'm just going to beat you in the open space, whether it's man, whether it's something else. We're just going to make plays through the air through pinpoint accuracy and hitting our guys for a lot of yak, which is yards after catch for those that are, unfamiliar. So getting St. Paul, I just really like the look of this, and it's in a good ad. He was a guy that walked on at University of Oregon, received like a late walk-on thing, but we've had a lot of successes with walk-ons when it comes to it. Remember Greg Dulcich, remember Carson Schwessinger. So we're hoping St. Paul's the next guy in that kind of lineage to kind of take over and make way more of that walk-on status.
No question about it, Will. And such a great point there about that Sinceri Kirk Cignetti system about, not to steal an NBA analogy there, but, the pace and space of the Miami Heat in the LeBron, Spoelstra era, which, oh, by the way, they went to Chip Kelly. Spoelstra went to Chip Kelly when Chip was at Oregon to sort of learn pace and space. So it's interesting that Cignetti system, they leverage a lot. You talked about the crossing routes. They also leverage a lot of stack receiver formation. And, so you're kind of creating the pick routes without picking, there's sort of secondary routes where you're basically just trying to create crowds and confusion with the defense. And there's going to be a vacant space in the field where you can get the ball to a playmaker and then rely on his speed. And St. Paul seems to fit that bill really well with the Wilson. So I think he's going to be a really nice gadget piece in the slot with an opportunity to have some go routes and really shock you, sort of on the outside as well. And then that element in the return game to be able to create some short fields and be able to control the clock and control time of possession. So I think a really great get here, Will. Just sky is the limit. And it just slowly, brick by brick, this thing is starting to come together. The ceiling is higher. The floor is higher. We've talked about it. We're in that 7-9 win range. And now we're seeing that pipeline develop moving forward. So lots to be excited about, Will. Who would have thought, even 4, 5, 6 months ago that the program would be in the state that it's in. So just thrilled of where we are going. More to come, but I think the big vision is there with DeShaun, and it's coming together. Any closing thoughts, Thriller, before we sign off?
No, I mean, just keep the momentum up on the recruiting trail. That effort and urgency is showing, and I think the fan base really appreciates just the effort and urgency that DeShaun Foster is putting to get this program, back to life in a lot of ways. So we appreciate what DeShaun's doing. We appreciate what the staff's doing. We still got a lot of, potential hits with some of these kids that came out this past weekend. I know Larry Fitzgerald's son was holding today. So just a lot of exciting, little tidbits from UCLA. And it just seems like anytime a hot recruit's in town, they want to be a part of the UCLA experience. They at least want to tour it, see what it's all about. And that's just very encouraging to hear, as somebody that's covered the program. And I know the fan base feels the same. So effort and urgency, we need it from the fan base this year in terms of showing up. And we need it from the coaching staff to continue on this recruiting trail in the portal and of these high school kids. So let's keep it up, guys. Let's keep doing it.
Let's keep it up. As Thriller says, effort and urgency. And never forget, this is the #1 public school in the world. This is the most beautiful campus in the world. This is a student body and an alumni network that is so formidable, but also so humble and approachable. And all of those things make for an incredible student-athlete experience. Be loud, be proud, roar like Bruins, and as always, until Will and I get back together in a few days, 4s up forever.